Morning. Good to see you today. Happy Sunday. Today I'm going to be following up with another talk from a book that I've been exploring for the past several months now. Just This Is It by Tag and Dan Layton, which I've found to be really good so far. And so there's a koan actually that I came across in reading the book that really stood out to me. Koans have eluded me at different times throughout my practice and studying, especially to begin with. They were very confusing, because they're very short and point to basically the nature of reality. It's a exchange between a teacher and a student typically, although in this case, not exactly. So I'm just gonna read the koan and then go line by line and see what we can pick out from it. The book actually does a pretty good job of bringing out what the koan is pointing to in a couple different ways, and I thought that was interesting. And so that's kind of the framework of the talk today, is breaking down this koan. So this is the Book of Serenity, case 98. And the title of the chapter in the book is A Legacy from an Empty Pot. And so not entering the world, not following conditions. In the emptiness of the pot of ages, there's a family tradition. White duckweeds breeze gentle, evening on an autumn river. An ancient embankment, the boat returns, a single stretch of haze. And so the first line is not entering the world. And at first glance, if we don't have any understanding of this practice or these teachings, not entering the world can seem like it's inviting us to maybe be a hermit, completely retreat from the world and don't go out into the world and just live in isolation. And of course, as you know, there's probably a little bit more that's being alluded to here. And so this not entering the world echoes Dong Shan's calls to his students to go where there is no grass for 10,000 miles, or to find the place beyond hot or cold, or to follow the traceless bird's path. And so each of those is a teaching that I have found to be pretty helpful, actually. So it's no grass for 10,000 miles, So the teacher is saying, go to the place where there is no grass for 10,000 miles. Pretty difficult to do, to go somewhere where there's no grass for 10,000 miles. So what is a teacher inviting the student to do here? Actually go to a physical place where there's no grass? Or is there something else being pointed out here? And of course, in this, saying the grass is the relative or the phenomenal world of this and that. And so the teacher is saying, go to this place where, in one way it could be, go where there is no relative world, or where there's no this and that, And we might think there must be a physical place we can go to where, maybe in isolation, maybe away from everything else, where I can just get away and not be bothered by the everyday experiences that we encounter. But this is not saying to negate the relative world. This is not saying to completely retreat from the difficulties of our everyday lives. And so perhaps not being caught is a better way to put it. Not being caught by the everyday experiences that we encounter, not being pulled in, which we commonly do as we live our lives and we get pulled into people, places, and things, ideologies, work, relationships, thoughts that we have about how things should be or how they are, we get pulled in by this and we get caught. And we get caught in the relative world. We get caught by the grass. And so another teaching that Dongshan uses is to go beyond heat and cold. And this is to go beyond worldly affairs and comfort zones. I'm teaching I actually am wrapping up teaching a course at one of the schools around here, and I brought this up, and I commonly do in the work that I do, because I think this is a very helpful teaching to go beyond comfort zones, to go beyond worldly affairs, but more in particular the comfort zone, you know. And so, in one way, we could look at it and say, the teachers invited us to go beyond heat and cold. Don't move. Does anybody know the Suzuki says don't move, but I don't mean not to move. Yeah.
That doesn't mean you can't move. Right. Don't move.
Right. So I just thought of this before, like half hour before this talk today. But very relevant, it's very in line with this teaching. Suzuki says don't move, but that doesn't mean you can't move, much like going beyond the heat and cold. So when it's hot, yeah, maybe there's a point at which you have to move. You have to actually adjust, things and get to a cooler place. However, we have this automatic tendency, and Steve Matushak in his talk the other week alluded to this, like we're constantly adjusting, to please and protect ourselves. And the extent to this is pretty astonishing. We're constantly doing things to please and protect ourselves, just adjusting our posture slightly on the cushion, that's getting comfortable, going to a place that's more comfortable than it currently is. And this is constant. If we watch our mind throughout the day, our life is basically controlled by these, seeking for something that is better than it currently is, running towards this or running away from that, So the reason I brought this up in class is it's actually very helpful to recognize that this is actually central to a lot of the therapies that therapists use nowadays, DBT, CBT, that kind of stuff, dialectical behavioral therapy, and cognitive behavioral therapy. And this is emotion regulation, learning to regulate your emotions. And what do we mean by that? That's basically just not having this automatic tendency to try to run away from how we're feeling. And so this is what the teacher is inviting us to do is look at that, but it's not saying you can't move. Then another teaching here is follow the traceless bird's path. And so the author here, Taigen Dan Leighton, uses a couple words to describe this. When a monk asked him, Dongshan, what was the bird's path that he regularly recommended? Dongshan replied, one does not encounter a single person. And so what is this not encountering a single person? What is this traceless bird's path? Well, it's not encountering a single person indicates the emptiness of self. And what is the emptiness of self? This is this is at the core of our delusion. We believe we're something particular that doesn't change. And so not encountering a single person is seeing the emptiness of all beings. Seeing that there couldn't be something that persists and doesn't change. This really goes against the fabric of reality. Or reality. And so in doing that, we're confused and believing that there's something substantial. We're missing the mark. We're confused. And this is right at the core of our confusion. And so, and the bird flying with no traces of itself as a remnant. And so the bird flies without a trace of itself. And as we've heard the teachings pointed out here is a Buddha doesn't act with intention. And what is acting with intention? It comes from our, thinking, and our plans and designs. It's our intention to have things be a certain way. And when we act out of this, we're not following the traceless bird's path. The bird doesn't leave a trace of itself as it's flying. Human beings, we commonly do leave traces. This made me think of, which I've always found kind of an odd thing, which is legacy. When you get to that point where you're starting to think about legacy, what do I want to leave behind? What is my life for? Why am I doing this? Am I leaving a good impact on the people that are going to come next in line? And so when we start to think about this, it very much reminds me of leaving traces. We're very much having the intention to leave traces of our legacy. I'm not dismissing this, by the way. I'm not necessarily saying this is bad, but there's a correlation there where we think in this way. We think, I want to get a job, but not only do I want to get a job that pays well, I want to get a job which kind of hoists me up as something important. I want to be an important person in this world. And I want to have, even if it's good intentions, I want to have a good impact on other people. Well, if we look at that, what is good and bad? What's good? What's that saying? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. That type of thing, where it's like, yeah, we might have ideas about what's good and what might be good, but if you really look at that, it doesn't necessarily, our idea of good might not be somebody else's idea of good. And it may not be that way, the way that we think it is, and it commonly isn't. So the monk then asked if following the bird's path equals seeing one's original face. But Dongshan replied that by so believing, the monk was turning things upside down. When the monk then asked, what is the original face? Dongshan replied that the original face is not following the bird's path. The true original face is beyond any path or technique to achieve it. So talk about being confusing. So the teacher says, follow the bird's path. Well, is that the original face? Is following the bird's path the original face? Teacher is basically saying, no, it's not, So he's kind of being contradictory here. So the teacher's advising the student to follow the traceless bird's path. But the issue with that is that there isn't a path to the original face, to reality. How could there possibly be a path to just this? It is never in, like, reality. We're never inseparable from reality. Just this is it. And that's the title of Taigen Dan Layton's book, which is, how could we have to have a path to get right to this moment, to right here and now? And that's what the teacher is pointing out, is that, yeah, I'm saying follow the traceless bird's path, but to arrive at just this by following a path is off the mark. So following a path is basically to adhere to certain regulations, to certain rules that we need to follow in order to get from here to there. And it's never apart from us. All right, so the second part of the koan here is not following conditions. Not following or being caught by conditions is to know there is one who is not busy, as Dongshan's teacher Yun Yan expressed it. And this is referring to case 21 in the Book of Serenity, which starts with Yun Yan sweeping the ground. Cleaning the temple was a common activity of monks, and apparently this was when Dao Wu and Yun Yan were students together. Dao Wu saw Yun Yan sweeping and said, presumably with a critical tone, "Too busy." But Yun Yan responded, "You should know there is one who is not busy." Dao Wu said, "If so, then there's a second moon." Yun Yan held up the broom and said, "Which moon is this?" So another koan to illustrate one line in the koan that we're going through here. So Dao Wu said, "Too busy," with a critical tone. So Dao Wu, another student that was practicing with Yan Yan, was likely admonishing him for not maybe studying practice. It's hard to say, exactly what Dao Wu meant by this, but we could take it as maybe Dao Wu was saying, "Hey, why are you too busy sweeping? Why aren't you engaging in meditation practice or studying the sutras or the literature?" And we commonly do have ideas about what this is, what practice is. I know I certainly was confused by this, and it took me actually quite a while to start to understand what this was, what study and practice is. We can commonly think that, especially when we see how things are set up a certain way when we go to a Zen center. So this is the way you're supposed to do this. And then we start to, or I'll just personalize it. I started to look for the reasons. What is the reason behind why we're doing this? What is the reason behind the rituals, the chanting? Why do we do things this way instead of a different way? And I was very pleased over time to figure out that it's to bring us back to here and now. When we have things set up in a certain way, it's conducive to us being mindful, to us being aware. So that's what all of this is about, is just being fully present in the here and now. And we do things in a certain way because it's conducive to awakening. But nevertheless, for I would say several years, I was caught. I was caught with thinking that this is because of that. We do this because we're doing it for that reason. So the meditation, for example, meditation is limited to the cushion in a zendo. We're not practicing meditation unless we're in the zendo facing the wall, sitting in a certain way. Well, as Steve Hagen alluded to the other week in his talk, meditation is not limited to the cushion. What is it? Life without substitute. It's basically meditation practice. Just being fully engaged in the moment, in the activity that you're currently doing. Meditation is very helpful, like when you're sitting on the cushion, to watch your mind and be fully here and now. Gary Snyder once said, Zen comes down to two activities, meditation and cleaning the temple, and it is up to each of us to decide how widely the temple boundaries stretch. Just a slight change in wording here. He says cleaning the temple. I think taking care of the temple, sounds a little bit better. So we don't get so specific to cleaning. So it's taking care of the temple. And then we decide how far the temple boundaries stretch. And this is an important point. Meditation, taking care, is this only limited to our practice at the Zendo? Is this only limited to when we're at a meditation retreat and we're doing work period? Is it only limited to those activities, those specific activities? And the point of the sentence here is that no, it's not. this is what we commonly do is we set things up, especially in our mind, so that things are very specific. There's boundaries. This center has walls, and anything beyond these walls is not meditation practice. Anything beyond these walls, I don't have to take care of because it's not part of my practice. And so when we limit things in this way, we're not seeing clearly what these teachings and practices is pointing out to. You know, I every time. So I've been teaching, right? At one of the schools around here. And I don't know why. It's like I always reach this point when I'm talking where I look at the audience and there's like, you know, I can see that maybe people are bored or something. And I don't know how to get beyond that. I don't have any jokes for you guys. I know Norm does a really good job with telling jokes and stuff like that, but yeah, I get kind of nervous whenever I see that. I'm sorry for that. Anyway, moving on. So Yun Yan responded, "You should know there is one who is not busy." And this one who is not busy is reality. So Yun Yan is responding in a way where he's saying, you should know, Dao Wu, that there is one who is not busy. And we're never apart from reality. Even though Yan Yan is sweeping and taking care of that activity, he's not separate from reality. He's not separate from just this. Even though he's sweeping, the appearances can seem busy. It's always coming and going, and there's constant change, and there's things happening, and it can look busy, especially being in a house full of kids, for example, which is, as you know, my current life. It can be busy, it can be very busy. And so within that, there is one who is not busy. Who is that one? What is that one? Well, we can't really say. The point is are we taking care of what needs to, the moment? Are we taking care of just this moment? Or are we distracted, being, pulled away in different directions, not necessarily in the relative world, but in our own mind? Are we able to attend to the task at hand, the moment, and are we confused about that? So Dao Wu responded, if so, then there's a second moon. And moon is commonly used as a symbol for truth, reality. And what we commonly do is we compartmentalize our life. We can think maybe that sweeping, is one activity that's separate and apart from my activities in the Zendo. That meditation is separate and apart from sweeping. We compartmentalize. We're one person in this situation, we're another person in this other situation. And in that sense, there's myriad realities, But what's being pointed out here is that there's just this. The one who is not busy is capital R reality. And so the second moon would be a separate reality. And perhaps Dao Wu was expressing concern that Yan Yan was believing there was a separate reality. Yan Yan held up the broom and said, which moon is this? Yan Yan responded rhetorically by asking which moon, because he sees there's not two. There's not two moons. There's not two realities. So Dao Wu was trying to, call him out for being too busy, for being maybe distracted. And Yan Yan is responding, basically, there's not two. There's just this one reality. So which moon is this is basically a rhetorical question. Very good response. So even in the midst of our seemingly chaotic lives, there is one who is not busy. And this is not following conditions and not being caught by this or that. In the emptiness of the pot of ages, there's a family. So one facet of this image is the difficulty of finding nourishment from an empty pot. So if you can just picture that, trying to eat from a pot that's clearly empty, very hard to do. In Zen or Buddhist context, perhaps this pot is replete with emptiness. Or this pot is emptiness. So if we're thinking of the pot as being something particular that contains emptiness, well, wouldn't the pot be empty as well? There's nothing that we can solidify. There's nothing that's substantial. So there's not a pot that actually holds emptiness. So the pot would be empty as well. Empty of a separate and substantial self. And this reminded me of, I just went through the Course Mountains and Waters Sutra. It reminded me of a phrase in there, which is, the stone woman gives birth to a child in the night. Very provocative image, in my opinion. I really appreciated this. And so we have a stone woman who's giving birth to a child in the night, which seems impossible. Seems impossible for a stone woman to give birth to a child in the first place, let alone in the night. And so Okamura did a great job at pointing to what this was. Well, the stone woman is not confused by human sentiment, free of human feeling and discriminating mind. So that's the stone woman, not being confused, not being pulled in by the discriminating mind. And this woman gives birth to a child in the night. And the night is not being able to see distinctions, not seeing distinctions. I shouldn't say not being able to, but not seeing distinctions. So this is light and darkness. In the light, we can see boundaries. We can see separate, seemingly separate things. In the night, that goes away and it all appears just one. So somehow from this empty pot, a family tradition or legacy has been bequeathed, extending down over generations. And this is alluding to transmission. And Hongzi might be implying here that what sustains this transmission is the teaching of emptiness, clearly seeing the non-separation and interconnectedness of all beings. Very curious thing, transmission. How does this get handed down from generation to generation? What is this family tradition and how does it stay intact? It seems quite messy. If you look at some of the lineage charts and stuff like that, and how does this actually stay intact over time, especially when the stone woman gives birth to a child in the night? Is this a specific knowledge, small k knowledge, that's handed down from one person to the next? What is that knowledge? What is being handed from one generation to the next? And what's being pointed out here is that it's the seeing the non-separation and interconnectedness of all beings. So this understanding, but it's not an understanding that somebody has. It isn't contingent on a person's relative understanding of the world. This is seeing reality as it is, which doesn't need a path to follow in order to see this. And by the way, I'm not saying that we don't need to practice or that coming to a Zendo, having a community isn't helpful. Very helpful. But reality is not contingent on that. It's not contingent on anything. All it is seeing just this. Reality with a capital R. So Uchiyama is, has been said here many times, you can't even exchange so much as a fart with another person, you know? And this reminds me of that, is like, if we can't even exchange something as that with another person, how then do we pass this understanding on? How does it get passed on? Very curious thing. All right, so white duckweeds, breeze gentle, evening on an autumn river. I had to do some research on this because I wasn't very familiar with what duckweeds were. And so I looked on YouTube and found some things that could enlighten me on what this is. So duckweed consumes nutrients from water. It's basically a water purifier. And so a lot of people put duckweed in their tanks at home, their fish tanks, in order to keep it healthy. And it consumes nutrients that fish give off, and other things in the tank as well, and in the lake or the pond. Healthy duckweed is green. And so when it turns white, that means it's lacking nutrients and it's dying. And so white duckweeds would sort of give this impression of something fading, something, dying essentially. In the third line of his verse, Hongzi sets an autumnal scene with white duckweeds, breeze gentle, evening on an autumn river. In the dusk, white duckweed blossoms float on the surface of the stream. Their drift depending on the sway of soft breezes as well as the current. In such a scene of fading light and the year passing, sadness may be available. And yet it can be a reminder that coming and going, life and death, are appearances of the one mind, coming and going thus. Last line here. So an ancient embankment, the boat returns, a single stretch of haze. This reminded me of Steve Matushak's Wednesday night study group, the Dhammapada. I was able to go a couple times in the past few months, and I found it very helpful. I would highly recommend it if anybody can go. But it's number 85 in the Dhammapada. Few among men are those who cross the farther shore. The rest, the bulk of men, only run up and down the hither bank. And so this other shore is often seen as like an image for nirvana. We're on this shore, and the other shore, we're on this shore suffering, we're caught in confusion, and we want to get to that other shore because that's nirvana. And so they're saying few people cross to the farther shore, to that place of nirvana. And the rest, the bulk, only run up and down the hither bank, just run up and down, in confusion. So this would be, this image of nirvana would be an escape from the conditioned phenomenal world of striving. And we imagine a place where we can be free of suffering. If only I can get to that place, my life will be at ease and I can finally live comfortably, happily ever after. Of course, that isn't necessarily the case. Where's the other shore? The other shore is right here, right now. So this is staying close to the one not busy while amid the world of conditions and confused beings. And staying right here, right now. We don't have to go to another shore. There isn't another shore for us to go to. The understanding, reality is right here and right now. We don't need to seek for it. As soon as we seek, we start looking for the passage to get to that other place. We're off the mark. We don't need to be ferried across the river to get to the other side because it's always right here. we wake up in the midst of delusion. We wake up to delusion. We can wake up and see that how much time we've spent or how often we're caught in this and that, how often we're confused. So the single stretch of haze may refer to the hazy lineage of transmission, barely surviving another generation. Somehow this family tradition continues to flower anew out of sometimes seemingly broken or at least cracked old pots, even today. Comments or questions right now? I have one last thing to read, but I wanted to open it up. There's a commentary that I found from the from this koan that I thought was actually very helpful. I'm not going to give any commentary on the commentary. I just want to read it because I think it really pulls out beautiful imagery, I think, and questions from this koan that I found to be very helpful, and I don't think it needs commentary. So I'll do that after questions. Are you guys okay today?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to read it. There's no comments or questions. All right. Not entering the world, pure through and through. Where's the technique to help people? Not following conditions. You should know there is one who is not busy. In the emptiness of the pot of ages, from an empty pot, how can we satisfy hunger? It is always thus. There is a family tradition. Are we born into it or do we marry into it? White duckweeds breeze gentle, swaying so peacefully. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. Is this breeze that follows conditions? Evening on an autumn river, days end, years end, such sweet sorrow, the unique breeze of reality. An ancient embankment, the boat returns. This other shore is so familiar. The weary boatman gladly pulls the barge upriver again. A single stretch of haze. Feet at the shore, head in the clouds, the solitary embankment evaporates too. An exhale on a chill autumn morning reaches out to greet the next of kin.
Can you say again where that came from?
Book of Serenity. Yeah. Case 98.
Bob Dylan lifted some lyrics out of there.
Yeah, actually. It's funny you say that because Tigan Dan Layton references that in the book. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Anything? Thank you.